about to have is, when is it time to stop driving? And is there any set age that anybody can adopt as a policy? Joining us now to talk about it is Carla Brumfield. She's a social worker with Home Instead of Baton Rouge who provides care for people that are up in their years. Carla, thanks for being on the program.
Thanks for having me.
When to get mom or dad to stop driving is an issue that affects just about all families. And is it something that there's no set age? I mean, I've known people that could drive just fine way up into their 80s.
Right. That's something that you see. I mean, we have people in the area who are in their 90s who I would feel are maybe even safer on the road than some in their 20s. But having that conversation and just looking out for warning signs is always helpful. Doing it before they get to an age where you feel like you're kind of just overstepping and having to make a decision for a loved one is always beneficial. Home Instead did a study, and they talked to individuals who are 70 and older. Not that that is necessarily the golden age, but it's a great age to kind of start, because we're seeing a lot of people being more and more independent through that age. So having conversations before they start getting even older and having more setbacks and declines that would put them at further risk of being on the road is probably about the time you start having those types of conversations.
You know, Carla, for a lot of people, I've got friends who have gone through this with their parents.
Right.
And they will tell us quietly, she's a menace, but this is her independence. That if we even broach the subject, she just completely goes off her rocker. I mean, do you have to use subterfuge sometime to get mom or dad or grandpa away from the vehicle?
I mean, there are times that we have talked to families. I know with my own grandmother, we went through a situation. She had Alzheimer's, and so it was at a point where we couldn't really consistently convince her that she wasn't safe driving, because it was a conversation you would have to have every couple of minutes with her. We ended up having to take her keys away. I think we took the battery out of the car for a while and said, oh my goodness, it's just not working. We're going to have to put it in the shop. There's been a recall, so you kind of do things to steer them in different directions so that they have a little something else to focus on besides their lack of independence at that point.
It's funny you should mention that. When I teased this story in promos yesterday, I got an email from a listener that said that they had to disable the starter on Dad's car, then get the car towed, telling him it was broken down. Then they kept telling him the parts for his car were on back order. And the email says once he was without the car for about 3 weeks, he kind of got over it and agreed to let the family hire somebody to drive him around. Now, of course, not everybody can afford a driver for mom or dad.
No, and that is something that you see. But there's a lot of individuals, like I said, they did a study of those who are about 70 and older, and 90% of those seniors said that they rely on their independence by driving, but a lot of them even said after they stopped driving, they felt like they didn't really lose that independence. So it was something that they felt like made them more and more independent, but they were noticing that they were even making their own kind of decisions on not driving as far, only driving during the day, making short trips and not taking long trips, those sorts of things. They were already putting barriers on themselves. And so it helps when families talk to them about it earlier to start looking at some of those warning signs.
Carla, I've got a friend who's a gerontologist. He specializes in medical management for the elderly.
Sure.
And what he told me is he advises his elderly patients to bring their families in. And they sit together and they say, if we see dings on the car, if we see the real wheel rims scraped up because you're hitting curbs, if you're starting to accumulate a lot of tickets, we're going to start having a conversation then about when it's time for you to turn over the keys. Is this something that you would recommend?
It is. I will also say, having worked in the medical field for several years as a social worker, there's several physicians who don't want to be the ones making that call. They see these patients on an outpatient basis, and they don't feel as though they really have the authority to make that decision themselves, which is why Home Instead came up with a website. It's called letstalkaboutdriving.com, and it gives families pointers, tips. There's videos to watch about how to kind of spur these conversations. It's great to get the physicians involved, but that needs to be a conversation that the families need to have with the physician to see if it's something that they're willing to do. It's wonderful that your friend who's a gerontologist is willing to do it, but there are some physicians who just don't feel that that's really their place. The family needs to be able to step in and take take the reins of that. But like you said, one of those warning signs is some of those dents in the car. Some individuals you'll realize that once they're getting on the road or after they've been on the road, they're a little bit more irritable and agitated, even with the idea of thinking about driving. So those are a couple of different things for families to be looking out for.
One of our listeners on our live chat, Lance, asks, why lie when you're trying to talk them out of the keys? Just tell them the truth. It would seem to be that some family dynamics, the truth is fine. In some family dynamics, the truth is just not going to work.
Right. It can be that, and it also can be a cognitive impairment. You have individuals who have Alzheimer's or dementia. They're not understanding that they don't have the capacity to be able to still drive. And that's something that any of us who have dealt with loved ones who have Alzheimer's or dementia recognize that reality is not something that always sets in for them by any means. And so being able to give them something tangible for them to understand is a lot more helpful than trying to convince them that they're not safe driving, because they don't understand that a lot of the time. And so what you have to do is put something that's very tangible in front of them and explain to them the car is broken, whatever the case may be, because that, you're not safe to drive isn't always something that's accepted or even something that's necessarily understood.
What about cases where it's not that dad is bringing the car home and it's got dents and dings and the hubcaps are smashed from hitting curbs, but just in general, dad drives 15 miles an hour in a 40 zone and creates a traffic jam behind him. What do you do about that?
Absolutely. Like I said, having these conversations prior to are super helpful. I had one gentleman that I met with, and he, poor guy, he had a mother who would call him, and she stopped in the middle of Airline Highway because she couldn't remember which direction to turn. There's cars honking. She's getting more and more frustrated. She's crying on the phone, and he's at work trying to figure out how in the world he can keep his mother safe. So some of these conversations, having them before you reach this point is huge. I know all of us who are on the road see people who are driving entirely too fast or entirely too slow. They're not only putting themselves at risk, but putting others at risk. We have conversations about safe driving with teens. We need to be able to find ways to do that with our seniors, which is why having that conversation earlier than waiting until it's absolutely imminent is super important.
All right, Carla, if you don't mind, real quickly, give us the website again where we can all go look, and if we've got some older drivers that we're concerned about, get some help.
Absolutely. It's letstalkaboutdriving.com. That's something that Home Instead has done a lot of research. There's it's a free website for them to go and look at. There's an interactive safe driving planner, some different videos on how to start conversations and resources and tips to help seniors stay safe on the road.
It's not an easy topic to broach, especially if mom or dad are an independent individual, and that
absolutely.
And when those skills start to slip, not every family can hire Morgan Freeman to drive mom around.
No, that's true. And Home Instead is available. We have caregivers who are available for intermittent assistance or assistance on a continuing basis. Our goal is to help seniors be able to age in place and be safe at home. And if you are somebody who wants to be independent, some of our clients don't have the freedom or the safety tips to be able to go and drive themselves across town to go to the casino like they want to.
Yep.
But we can set up a caregiver who can be there, form a relationship with them, have a companionship situation, and be able to take them so that they're not homebound and be able to allow them still to have that independence in the community.
Carla Brumfield with Home Instead. Appreciate you being with us this morning. Thanks so much.
Take care.